I am Veronica, 37 years old, standing inside a small tech repair shop in downtown Boston while trying to breathe through the suffocating grief of losing my only child. As a former financial risk analyst, I spent my entire career dissecting hidden threats and calculating vulnerabilities, completely blind to the fact that a fatal trap was being triggered inside my own family. 3 months after my boy passed away in what the local authorities ruled a tragic hiking accident, I finally found the strength to bring his water-damaged iPhone in for a simple data recovery. The technician had only been examining the logic board for a few minutes when the routine smile completely vanished from his face, leaving his cheeks pale as his fingers began trembling uncontrollably over the terminal keys. Without saying a single word, he rushed past me to flip the open sign to closed, pulled the heavy security blinds down over the glass, and turned the deadbolt with a loud click that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet shop. He gripped my arm, pulling me into a secure back server room, illuminated only by the blue glow of his computer monitors, before plugging a specialized decryption cable into the shattered device. Caleb whispered, "You need to see this. Before you're the next one." My heart hammered violently against my ribs as a corrupted video cache from the cloud storage began piecing itself together, forcing me to look directly through the camera lens of my late boy's phone. And in that dim room, looking at the raw footage recorded just seconds before his final fall, my agonizing heartbreak instantly turned into a freezing, calculated resolve. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and please hit the like and subscribe buttons right now if you have ever had to stand up to the very people who were supposed to protect you. Now let me tell you how a simple errand uncovered a calculated nightmare. The violently shaking frame on the computer screen cast a pale light over my freezing face. The video did not capture the gruesome act of murder, directly leaving my mind to conjure the unseen horror. Instead, it only recorded a terrifyingly tight, suffocating angle from the unforgiving forest floor, where my young son Evan was desperately cowering. The lens was partially obscured by dirt and dried leaves, framing him as he pressed his small frame hard against the rough surface of a jagged rock. His entire body was trembling violently, vibrating with a primal fear. His breathing was agonizingly heavy, ragged and rapid, echoing the extreme, unadulterated panic of an innocent child who knew he was being hunted in the sprawling wilderness. Through the distorted, low-quality audio of the recording, the ominous rhythmic sound of heavy footsteps crushing brittle, dry branches grew steadily closer. Each loud snap echoed like a gunshot in the tense, unnatural silence of the woods. Mixed with this relentless approaching doom was the harsh, ear-piercing static of a handheld walkie-talkie. Then came a sound that made the blood in my veins turn to absolute paralyzing ice, the chilling, unmistakable voices of my own mother and father. They sounded completely unrecognizable, entirely devoid of the familial warmth I grew up with. Instead, they were coldly and methodically barking calculated strategic instructions to each other over the radio, coordinating their movements to effectively corner their trapped victim, ensuring there would be absolutely no avenue for his escape. The camera angle shifted frantically as the boy tried to retreat further. Suddenly, the towering, looming figure of my younger brother Travis briefly flashed into the chaotic frame. His face was twisted into a cruel grimace just seconds before an unseen, incredibly violent struggle abruptly ensued. The video feed jerked wildly, a blur of motion and rustling fabric, as the phone was struck forcefully from Evan's grasp and violently thrown against the hard earth. The visual feed instantly shattered into complete blackness, leaving nothing but the raw, unfiltered audio. Piercing through that pitch-black darkness came the agonizing, desperate scream of my little boy, a sound of pure, agonizing terror that tore right through my soul and will forever haunt my nightmares, right before the signal abruptly died out. The sudden heavy silence that descended upon the small, dimly lit room was deafening, pressing down on my chest. "Caleb, his face ashen and his eyes wide with a sudden terrified urgency, lunged forward without a second thought. He hastily yanked the connecting cable from the device, severing the connection. He looked at me, his chest heaving. "If these people know the phone still has data, they'll do whatever it takes to get it back," he warned, his voice dropping to a harsh, urgent whisper that carried the weight of our new, dangerous reality. "You need to leave here immediately." My hands were completely numb as I wordlessly accepted the small, cold metal hard drive from him, acutely aware that it contained the only backup of the damning, heart-stopping video. I had to bite the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper, just to suppress the violent, uncontrollable tremors racking my entire body. I could not fall apart right now. My mind had to switch into a cold, calculated revenge mode. As I forced my leaden legs to turn around and walk out toward the parked car, the horrifying, world-shattering reality finally settled over me, wrapping around my throat like a suffocating vice. The remorseless monsters who had ruthlessly hunted and killed my only child were not strangers in the night, but my own flesh and blood. 2 days after the incident at the repair shop, I sat motionless in the secure office of my lawyer in the Boston financial district. My attorney Mitchell, a ruthless advocate known for his unwavering discretion, wasted absolutely no time. He immediately retained the services of a top-tier digital forensics expert, bringing him into our confidential fold. Their primary objective was to meticulously extract every single byte of hidden data from Evan's severely damaged device. This painstaking, highly technical process involved circumventing complex security protocols to recover synchronized iCloud backups. Furthermore, the specialist worked tirelessly to pinpoint the exact moment-by-moment GPS location history from the days leading up to the tragedy, while successfully retrieving a terrifying cache of recently deleted text messages that had been purposefully wiped from the broken phone's internal memory. Throughout this agonizing wait, my best friend Sarah sat firmly by my side, her knuckles entirely white as her fingers remained tightly interwoven with mine. Her unwavering, silent presence was the only thing anchoring my shattered spirit to reality, helping me maintain my fragile sanity when the expert finally broke through a heavily encrypted folder deep within the operating system. Together, holding our collective breath, we uncovered a hidden voice recording file, a desperate secret audio memo that my brave Evan had deliberately concealed in a disguised application just days before the horrific incident occurred. The oppressive, heavy silence of the professional office was abruptly shattered when Evan's trembling, terrified voice echoed from the laptop's high-fidelity speakers. "Grandma was right. They really are aiming for the trust fund. I'm scared of Uncle Travis," he whispered, his frail tone vibrating with an unmistakable, profound dread that instantly made the blood in my veins run completely cold. Prompted directly by that chilling posthumous revelation from my child, Mitchell immediately launched a discreet, aggressive background investigation into my parents' recent legal and financial activities. Leveraging his extensive corporate network, he swiftly discovered a highly disturbing paper trail indicating that my mother and father had recently booked a private, off-the-books appointment with a prominent yet unethical psychiatrist. They were secretly and methodically preparing a comprehensive ironclad conservatorship file entirely behind my back. Their sinister, calculated strategy was now perfectly clear. They were simply waiting for me to suffer a complete mental and emotional breakdown from the immense grief, so they could swiftly submit the medical documents to the probate court and legally seize total, unchecked control of my vast estate. A sickening, visceral realization suddenly washed over me, causing my stomach to violently churn as I vividly remembered my mother's peculiar new routine. Ever since the chaotic day of the funeral, she had been aggressively and uncharacteristically insisting on personally brewing and bringing me a specific cup of dark herbal tea every single night before bed, watching me intently until I drank every drop. Without a fraction of hesitation, I reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out the remaining unbrewed tea bags I had unconsciously brought with me, and immediately handed them over to Mitchell so he could dispatch them to an independent, highly secure toxicology lab for urgent chemical analysis. After thoroughly reviewing the horrifying, unfathomable scope of my own family's betrayal, we made the cold, calculated decision to maintain absolute strategic silence. We deliberately chose not to alert the local police department or any federal authorities at this specific delicate moment. We knew that bringing in standard law enforcement prematurely would undoubtedly tip our hand, giving those calculating monsters the necessary time and opportunity to panic and permanently destroy other crucial financial ledgers and hidden correspondence. We needed a perfectly airtight case, and until we gathered every single missing piece, I had to seamlessly play the role of the broken, unsuspecting daughter. That weekend, I stepped into the sprawling family mansion with unkempt hair and a vacant stare, actively transforming myself into the perfectly obedient prey. Walking through the grand double doors, I knew I had to completely bury my burning desire for vengeance under a flawless facade of total crippling despair. To ensure my performance was absolutely convincing, I meticulously faked severe short-term memory loss, deliberately asking the same mundane questions multiple times within a single hour, and acting completely disoriented in the very hallways I had navigated since childhood. I carefully added frequent, seemingly uncontrollable physical trembling to my daily routine. Letting my hands shake violently enough to spill water from my glass or clumsily drop heavy silver utensils clattering onto the floor during our painfully silent dinners. This highly calculated, agonizing display of manufactured vulnerability successfully caused my younger brother Travis and my parents to completely lower their guard. They watched my deteriorating state with barely concealed, sickening satisfaction, firmly believing that the toxic herbal concoction they kept forcing me to drink was finally destroying my nervous system exactly as they had maliciously intended. I had to be flawlessly stealthy, operating continuously right under the watchful eyes of my own tormentors, seizing every fleeting precious moment when their attention was inevitably diverted by their own selfish pursuits. I moved through the oppressive, silent house like an invisible ghost. First, I secretly slipped highly sensitive, military-grade micro-recording devices deep inside the concealed zippered lining of my everyday personal handbag, ensuring they would capture any close proximity conversations whenever I entered a room. Moving swiftly and silently, I also planted these tiny, undetectable electronic bugs deep within the inner pockets of the heavy winter coats, hanging carelessly out in the front hallway. Finally, I carefully secured one right underneath the heavy, ornate antique floral vase, displayed prominently on the main living room's central mahogany table. In the dead of midnight, safely locked inside the suffocating dark confines of my old bedroom, I plugged my noise-canceling earphones into the encrypted receiver and meticulously reviewed the gathered audio data. Listening to the chilling recordings in the pitch black, I quickly discovered that they were far too cautious to ever explicitly speak about the horrific murder itself. There were no direct confessions or careless mentions of their previous crimes. Instead, they consistently utilized highly coded, chillingly cold language, calmly discussing complex legal strategies, trust fund loopholes, and the absolute necessity of systematically stripping away my financial power and personal autonomy before I could ever recover my senses and fight back. Suddenly, my father's harsh, unyielding voice echoed clearly through the hidden microphone, his tone entirely devoid of any paternal warmth. "The doctor will handle the medical paperwork," he stated with absolute authority. "She will never be allowed to personally sign anything again." The very next morning at the grand breakfast table, Travis enthusiastically and obnoxiously announced his grand finalized plan to host a massive, lavish family gathering at the estate this coming Saturday. He falsely framed it as a supportive reunion for my emotional benefit, but the malicious, calculating glint in his eyes told a completely different story. It was blindingly obvious to me that this elaborate sudden event was not designed for comfort or shared mourning. Instead, it was a perfectly orchestrated, ruthless excuse. They fully intended to use the overwhelming, suffocating presence of our extended relatives to apply immense, inescapable public pressure, cornering my supposedly fragile, broken mind to aggressively force me into officially handing over complete control of all my remaining assets, effectively executing their hostile takeover under the guise of family love. The following Tuesday morning, the financial counteroffensive campaign was officially launched at Mitchell's office. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with grim determination as Mitchell brought me up to speed on our rapidly advancing strategy. He announced he had officially retained a sought-after forensic accountant whose sole directive was to meticulously track and analyze all hidden cash flows connected to my family's estate. In the same breath, he gravely handed over the official toxicology laboratory results. The detailed chemical analysis definitively confirmed our darkest suspicions. The herbal tea my mother had been persistently brewing contained a potent, dangerous neurosuppressive toxin, specifically designed to severely impair cognitive function and perfectly mimic an organic mental decline. We were already acutely aware of Travis's mounting, increasingly desperate need for immediate, untraceable cash to quickly cover his massive illicit gambling debts with several highly dangerous underground syndicates. Coldly exploiting this fatal weakness, we carefully engineered a highly lucrative, irresistible trap designed specifically for his unparalleled greed. We intentionally and subtly leaked a series of seemingly confidential financial documents within his easy reach, casually revealing the closely guarded existence of an unprotected secondary offshore trust account that currently held several $1 million in highly liquid assets. Continuing to play my agonizing role as the mentally fragile, utterly broken sister to absolute perfection, I feigned complete exhaustion during a brief encounter at the house. During this calculated performance, I casually pretended to hand over the temporary administrative management of that specific lucrative financial portfolio entirely to him, claiming I was simply too overwhelmed to deal with the endless paperwork. This strategic move predictably provided my greedy, morally bankrupt brother with the perfect, seemingly foolproof opportunity he desperately craved. Believing he was entirely unobserved, he immediately moved to secretly forge my official signature on several physical authorization documents, subsequently utilizing a highly sophisticated spoofed private email address to rapidly order a massive unauthorized wire transfer directly to an untraceable overseas shell company. As we sat securely in the law firm, silently monitoring the intricate digital trap being sprung in real time on Mitchell's dual-screen monitors, my attorney calmly explained the precise, devastating legal mechanics of our carefully laid snare. The bank will immediately generate a suspicious activity report, also known as ASAR, Mitchell stated, his sharp tone dripping with profound professional satisfaction. That specific mandatory federal document is the absolute most solid legal basis required for the FBI to officially step in and aggressively launch a full-scale financial crime investigation. Exactly as my brilliant legal team had mathematically anticipated, our highly secure, heavily encrypted monitoring server successfully logged every single digital footprint of the massive, illicit monetary transfer the very second it was blindly executed by my brother. Because the fraudulent transaction actively utilized complex, heavily regulated interstate communication networks to digitally move the stolen funds across international borders. This single fatal keystroke by Travis officially and irrevocably elevated his desperate, pathetic action from a simple state-level theft into a highly severe, heavily prosecutable federal offense known specifically under the law as wire fraud. With the federal trap now successfully sprung and the undeniable electronic proof of the severe crime permanently locked into our secure servers, Mitchell aggressively moved to finalize our devastating, comprehensive legal strategy. He meticulously compiled the irrefutable digital forensics extracted from the broken phone, the chilling hidden audio recordings, the damning toxicology and medical reports, and the newly generated highly incriminating federal financial documentation into one massive airtight legal dossier. We were now fully armed with absolute undeniable proof, legally bulletproof from every conceivable angle, and ruthlessly prepared to execute our ultimate devastating counterattack during the highly anticipated family gathering. On Saturday evening, the expansive, lavishly decorated living room of the grand family mansion was tightly packed with a dense crowd of extended relatives, all of them whispering quietly among themselves about my supposedly rapid tragic decline in health. My parents put on a sickeningly convincing Oscar-worthy performance of profound, inconsolable sorrow for their captive audience. Standing right in the very center of the softly murmuring crowd, they wiped away non-existent tears and loudly declared to everyone present that my mental and emotional health had completely and irrevocably collapsed under the weight of my recent grief. They painted a devastating, highly exaggerated picture of my daily struggles, heavily emphasizing to the sympathetic onlookers that I was no longer remotely capable of taking care of my basic personal needs, let alone competent enough to responsibly manage my vast complex financial assets and extensive real estate portfolio. Seizing this perfectly orchestrated, highly emotional moment, my younger brother Travis confidently stepped forward from the shadows and brought out a remarkably thick, intimidatingly dense stack of formal legal documents. He slapped the heavy pile down onto the polished surface of the central mahogany coffee table, with a sharp, resounding thud, aggressively demanding my immediate, unquestioning compliance. The binding predatory papers explicitly required me to legally sign away the absolute ownership of my primary residence, permanently transfer all controlling trustee rights over the highly lucrative family trust fund directly to his name, and officially give my formal legally binding consent to be committed to an involuntary long-term psychiatric treatment facility. The dense crowd of aunts, uncles, and distant cousins immediately began to tightly surround my chair, collectively applying an immense, suffocating layer of relentless, misguided peer pressure. They leaned in uncomfortably close, softly urging and foolishly advising me to just be a compliant, obedient daughter and sign the terrifying legal papers so that the family can finally have some peace after such a seemingly endless string of tragic events. They were acting entirely out of ignorant, misplaced concern, completely and blissfully unaware that their well-intentioned, comforting words were actively aiding and abetting ruthless, cold-blooded monsters in finalizing a horrific theft. Moving closer to firmly close their vicious trap, my mother gently reached out and purposefully placed a heavy gold-plated fountain pen directly into my visibly shaking right hand. Her tone was dripping with a nauseatingly thick, entirely fabricated sweetness as she softly whispered, "Sign it, my darling. Your father and brother are doing all this only because we want what is truly best for you." Maintaining my meticulously crafted, desperately vulnerable illusion of a thoroughly broken, entirely defenseless woman, I deliberately faked a severe, uncontrollable tremor as my pale fingers clumsily wrapped around the cold, heavy metal of the expensive pen. I kept my head bowed in an attitude of complete mock defeat, actively allowing the absolute sickening smugness, unrestrained arrogance, and insatiable venomous greed to plainly manifest and radiate across the deeply triumphant faces of Travis and my parents. They stood over me beaming with arrogant, silent pride, entirely convinced in their dark, twisted minds that they had flawlessly executed their sinister master plan and had finally completely won the ultimate prize. I slowly lowered my trembling hand toward the damning stack of paper, intentionally drawing out the agonizing suspense of the critical, final moment. But exactly as the sharp metallic nib of the fountain pen was a mere fraction of a millimeter away from touching the pristine white surface of the designated signature line, a sudden jarring noise shattered their illusion. The heavy, resonant chime of the front doorbell unexpectedly and frantically rang out, violently echoing through the grand foyer and abruptly cutting straight through the incredibly oppressive, suffocatingly tense atmosphere of the crowded, expectant mansion. Exactly at 8 o'clock in the evening, the main door burst open, marking the exact moment every single hypocritical mask of this family was ripped to shreds. Mitchell marched purposefully into the crowded, suffocating living room, flanked by two stern, uniformed local deputy sheriffs, whose authoritative presence instantly halted the room's malicious murmuring. In his steady hands, the attorney carried a heavy portable projector along with a secure encrypted USB flash drive that safely contained the absolute devastating truth of the dark conspiracy. This sudden, uninvited intrusion deeply shocked the wealthy assembly, freezing the greedy smiles right off my treacherous family's faces as the officers took up strategic positions near the exit, blocking any chance of escape from this impending legal reckoning. With all eyes locked onto the dramatic doorway, I forcefully threw the heavy gold-plated fountain pen onto the polished floor, where it clattered away uselessly against the ornate baseboards. I stood up perfectly straight, completely casting off my manufactured frailty-slurred speech and vacant stare, and confidently projected my voice across the entire silent hall. I loudly announced to every single gathered relative that absolutely no power of attorney asset transfer deeds or mandatory psychiatric medical treatment documents would ever be signed tonight, effectively shattering the elaborate multi-layered illusion of my mental submission and leaving my devious tormentors completely speechless, utterly paralyzed with confusion, and stripped of their perceived power. Without missing a single beat, Mitchell immediately activated his tech equipment and brightly projected a series of irrefutable documents directly onto the smooth white living room wall for everyone to witness. The massive, inescapable display clearly showcased the independent medical toxicology report, proving I was being systematically poisoned with dangerous neurosuppressive toxins, followed by the precise GPS tracking data from the night of the tragic hunting incident. Finally, the heart-wrenching, terrifying video recovered from Evan's broken phone filled the room, broadcasting the chilling audio of my parents coordinating the perimeter while Travis ruthlessly cornered my poor boy, completely exposing their cold-blooded, murderous plot to the stunned, weeping audience who could not believe the sheer level of depravity being displayed before them. "That's fake. Don't believe it, she's crazy. Turn off that machine right now." Travis screamed in complete sheer panic, his voice cracking sharply as his face contorted with immense rage while he looked around wildly at the gasping aunts and uncles who were backing away from him. Completely losing all cognitive control, my younger brother madly lunged directly toward Mitchell with his teeth bared and fists clenched, intending to smash the electronic projector to pieces to permanently hide the damning footage. However, before his feet could even clear the edge of the central rug, he was instantly tackled to the hard hardwood floor by the larger officer, who powerfully pinned his arms behind his back and tightly restrained him in heavy steel handcuffs. Travis writhed violently on the ground, spitting vicious curses, his desperate, aggressive actions only confirming his obvious, undeniable guilt to every wealthy witness present in the mansion. Meanwhile, my mother and father stood completely frozen like stone statues, the wicked triumph draining from their wrinkled faces as they realized their elaborate trap had turned into their own public execution. Their pale lips uselessly stammered nonsensical denials, but as the evidence continued to loop on the wall, they rapidly turned on their own accomplice, desperately shouting that Travis was the sole mastermind who engineered and carried out the entire horrific scheme alone. This pathetic, cowardly attempt to shift the legal blame occurred under the utterly horrified and deeply disgusted stares of dozens of our closest family members who now viewed the elderly couple with absolute loathing. 15 minutes after the utter chaos, the sharp sound of screeching tires braked heavily on the driveway leading into the mansion. Heavily armed federal agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation alongside tactical officers from the U.S. Marshals Service swarmed into the grand residence through the main entryway, carrying advanced tactical weapons and holding official arrest warrants freshly signed by a prominent federal judge. Their sudden loud entry instantly paralyzed the remaining family members, converting the luxury home into a brightly lit federal crime scene where absolutely no one could escape the tight perimeter. A senior FBI special agent stepped forward into the center of the room to formally read the federal arrest warrant to Travis for severe financial crimes, specifically interstate wire fraud and illegal identity theft, while multiple uniformed state police officers simultaneously handcuffed and escorted my disgraced parents out into the cold night for their direct, calculated involvement in the active murder investigation of my beloved son, Evan. Watching the three of them being dragged away in heavy iron chains under the flashing blue emergency lights provided the first true sense of deep emotional peace I had experienced since this horrific nightmare began. The subsequent legal process unfolded with immense, unrelenting intensity inside the packed federal courthouse over the following months, drawing massive public attention to our family's dark secrets. The grand jury swiftly returned a comprehensive multi-count criminal indictment against all three individuals, ensuring they would face the absolute maximum penalties allowed under the law. Furthermore, the presiding judge fiercely rejected every single negotiated plea deal put forward by their desperate defense attorneys, ultimately sentencing the treacherous trio to consecutive decades in a maximum security prison without any possibility of early parole, sealing their miserable fates inside concrete walls for the rest of their natural lives. 6 months later, when all the grueling legal proceedings, high-profile criminal trials, and the highly complicated estate probate processes were fully and successfully finalized by Mitchell's brilliant legal team, I officially regained absolute, undisputed control over the massive $27 million trust fund. The vast family wealth was finally secure, shielded forever from the clutches of the monsters who had brought so much devastation into my life, allowing me to use these extensive resources to build a beautiful charitable foundation dedicated entirely to honoring my son's eternal legacy and protecting other vulnerable children. This harrowing journey serves as a grim testament to how unbridled greed can twist sacred blood ties into the most lethal weapons imaginable. The first crucial lesson is to never blindly hand over control of your hard-earned assets or vital medical decisions to anyone else, regardless of familial relationships. Trust must always be verified, and legal safeguards must remain ironclad. Secondly, when confronted with ultimate betrayal, allowing panic to consume you will only seal your doom. Surviving such wolves requires absolute emotional control, sharp logical thinking, irrefutable evidence, and the strategic utilization of proper legal mechanisms. This structured approach is the only flawless method of retaliation, ensuring the permanent removal of your enemy's freedom while preserving your dignity and safety. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to all of you for listening to this painful, yet incredibly empowering journey toward true justice until the very last second. Please leave a comment below, sharing your profound thoughts on this shocking case. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for our next real-life gripping stories on Revenge Mode.